Welcome to another episode of Mission Compliance, Unleashing Growth Potential for Defense Contractors. In today's episode, we continue down the road of understanding CMMC, its regulations, and controls. Up next is AU L2-3.3.3. That's a lot of threes. Review and update logged events. We'll break down what this control means, why it matters, and how it impacts your organization's cybersecurity posture. We'll also provide practical insights and strategies for achieving compliance and securing your systems effectively. So whether you're a defense contractor aiming to win more contracts or simply someone interested in bolstering your cybersecurity knowledge, you're in the right place. Bazinga! We're joined once again today by Mike Frieder, President of On-Call Compliance Solutions and a CMMC Professional Assessor. So Mike, today we're talking about the importance of reviewing and updating logged events. This is a short control as far as words are concerned. We've seen some more wordy controls and stuff, so maybe it'll be a little easier. You'll explain that to us. So with that being said, why is it important to review logged events?
So this is it's a very interesting control because this begins to get into where I think a lot of IT directors sort of fall off in terms of their knowledge, particularly in the small to mid-sized enterprise. And this control effectively presupposes that your organization is running a SIEM system. And what I've found with working with most defense companies that have never been through something specific to cybersecurity like this before is that they really have no idea. I mean, they've got their antivirus in place, maybe they've got their basic patching up to date and things like that, but they really don't know what a security information and event management system is. So the first thing I gotta do before I start really going into what this control is we've got to talk about the system that you need in order to even be able to accommodate this control. And it's called a security information and event management system. It is a system that will take the log files from computers and sometimes firewalls and other network devices and stream those log files in real time or pretty close to real time to a central repository, process those files, and pull out the security sensitive information, throw away the rest. Sometimes it stores all the logs, just depends on how it works, and make useful alerts and logs out of that information. And sometimes the functionality can go further than that. Sometimes the functionality stops at actually just alerting people about, hey, there's something you should look at. Why is this important? In security, people are used to being reactive, right? Bad things happens on your computer, your antivirus reacts to it, and then you go take action. However, that's not good enough when your system is housing CUI or sensitive, control and classified information. So instead, what the government is mandating and what NIST highly recommends of anyone trying to secure CUI is that you don't just take a reactive approach, you take a proactive approach to actually monitoring your systems, whether there's bad things going on or not. And that's what a SIEM system does. It is a paramount shift in how security is handled. And in my opinion, it is a massive maturing point for most companies out there. So why do you need to be alerted to security sensitive information? Well, let's say that an attacker has somehow gained remote control of a machine and is attempting to escalate their permission from standard user to administrative user to do bad things and run scripts they shouldn't be doing or implement ransomware, which they need administrative control to do. Well, there's a surefire sign that something's wrong when a random user on your network, one, appears out of nowhere, two, gets escalated to administrator privileges. And we can stop right there, right? We can see what step comes next, which is they start, executing really bad stuff. But the thing is, if you're monitoring for new user creation, if you're monitoring for users that have permissions that are escalated without authorization, or just in general, you're seeing a stream of logs when users are having their permissions escalated, all of a sudden, we can stop bad things from happening when those things aren't bad yet. So in other words, it's obvious when a bad script starts to execute and the antivirus goes out and grabs it. But what happens when you have a legitimate user, someone who got remote control of the machine, and that legitimate user essentially is in a place where they're saying, they're doing things that would appear normal, right? Or that would go under the radar. And that is, in fact, the most dangerous thing. There's an old saying which is, you can lock, your wallet in your car, but if a criminal has the key to get in, it's really hard to figure out how your wallet disappeared. And computer systems are exactly that. There are ways to get into a system and gain legitimate credentials and access. And in that situation, you've got to have a method for stopping that person from executing and damaging it further and detecting that they're even in your system to begin with. That's what a SIEM system does. So now that we've explained all of that, we can get into the actual control, which is review and update logged events. And I think what you'll find is a lot of the controls that come on from here that we'll talk about in our next couple episodes, a lot of those controls are all going to depend upon the concept that you've got a SIEM system, and they're going to then basically tell you how you should be operating that SIEM system almost as a best practice. So when we talk about reviewing and updating logged events, what we're talking about is, hey, is someone actually looking at what the SIEM system is doing? In other words, did you install it, leave all the defaults going on, and then never look at it again, thinking you're in a better place? Because if you did, then you are not reviewing and updating logged events, and you would be failing this control. So in your documentation, in your standard operating procedures, and in your day-to-day practices, someone must be reviewing and updating logged events. In other words, if it was me and I was setting this up and this is how we do it, we would be streaming those logged events into our ticketing system when the alert hits a certain danger threshold, like a user permission escalation, and we would be reviewing that ticket. We would be updating notes on what's going on with that log and saying this is either legitimate, this is A-OK, or if not, we need to disable that user until we can figure out what in the world's going on with this random user that just got escalated because nobody authorized it. Or maybe someone didn't follow the permission escalation policy or the access control policy is really what I'm thinking of. So again, so incredibly critical to actually, and gosh, you guys, you kind of think it's a joke, right? Like it sort of seems like common sense that, hey, if I pay for and put a tool in place that I then actually like use it and monitor it. Not common sense. Not common sense at all. IT people are busy. Ask anyone in any IT department on earth, and they will tell you that they are busy. They got to keep a system up and running. That takes effort. Then they got to deal with the users messing it up. That takes effort. And then they got to upgrade it. And then they got to, try to secure it. Like the securing it usually comes last. So, someone on your team or outsourced, if that's the case, has got to be reviewing and updating these logged events. There's just no two ways around it. And this is a control in NIST, and I think it seems really basic and duh when you say it, but let me tell you how many companies out there are not practicing this. The majority of people we come across. So really good control. And I love that the folks at NIST really took the time to detail out precisely how you should be operating your SIEM system. It's almost educational as you go through the controls. It really does teach you what the best practices are and really walks you through common sense tactics. Something that I think, again, even we at OnCall have learned from.
Absolutely. And so we're just going to jump right into the next part. What are the assessment points on this one?
Yeah, so there's three primary assessment points in this stage. One is determining if a process for determining when to review logged events is defined. There's lots of ways to define it. You can define it inside of the SIEM system. You can define a full and comprehensive review that should happen at your quarterly risk management meetings. Again, I think it's good for higher ups to be asking, hey, what are the events that we had in our IT system over the past 3 months? It's a really good interval to do that. I personally, again, like the ideal scenario is you've got a SIEM system that is sending alerts into a ticketing system. And so that would mean that you're essentially looking at incidents on demand and approving or disapproving that, that's okay. That is the ideal scenario. You should really be looking at those events as close to in real time as possible. That's how you can catch an attacker. And by the way, it's proven that most major attacks, especially on larger systems, you know what? They're in your system checking you out for like 3 to 6 months. There are signs that there are people in your system. There are persistent connections from foreign countries. There's just all kinds of ways that they kind of really want to understand you before they let loose with a ransomware attack. So they know if you're a high value target. And frankly, they know how much money to ask for in the ransom. it takes time to gather that intelligence. And so I think it's really important to understand that, if you've got the right systems in place to see this kind of thing happening, it's all preventable. I mean, not all of it, but a good majority of these attacks are really preventable. Cool. Second assessment point, determine if event types being logged are reviewed in accordance with defined review processes. In other words, do you have some sort of a system for periodically reviewing what you're looking at? Again, maybe this year it's the passwords and how often do passwords change, or how are users being escalated to administrator? Are there random new users that are being created? Are there audits for that? That could be it today, but tomorrow there could be other signs of attack, with new and evolving attacks that come about. And do we have an ability to go back and look at determining if the event types, what it is that you're actually looking for in those logs, are they reviewed? Are they considered important, not important, et cetera? How good of a job are we doing there? And so, again, we can implement this a little bit in the SIEM system, but we can really implement it a lot in our quarterly risk management policy to review the effectiveness of what it is that we're watching for. And the final assessment point is determine if event types being logged are updated based on review. So, in other words, do we have a formal process for reviewing our SIEM solution and determining if there are things that need to be changed for what we're reviewing, logging, et cetera. And that's done periodically. It's put into tickets. It's put into a lot of different places. But again, we point to the quarterly risk management standard operating procedure in our company. That's where we manage risk. That's where we determine if event types being logged are actually updated and changed based on review, issue severity, et cetera. So those are the three major assessment points and kind of how we would probably give sample answers.
Awesome. So what are the potential difficulties in enacting this one in an organization?
Yeah, great question. I think that there are probably three different difficulties. Number one is that a company who doesn't have a system like this in place, doesn't understand the value of it, will have a really hard time justifying the cost. I would tell you that I think this is one of the absolute major places that we get pricing pushback from clients. They go, hey, look, we have invested in antivirus or endpoint protection. What do I need another system that's just going to watch my system for, right? And I say to people, why do you need to pay for a security system? And I got to tell you, some of these defense manufacturers, they don't, right? I mean, I can't tell you the number of facilities I walk into without proper camera systems and security and physical premise security controls, right? You know, I don't know. But what's interesting is you sit in those same meetings, you go, hey, you need this, this, and that. And they go, yeah, we've been meaning to get around to that. It is kind of common sense that we have it. It's kind of common sense that we don't have an open door, facility with massive amounts of like very dangerous machinery that a homeless person could just walk in and, chop themselves in half. Not to be dramatic about it, but I'm just, I'm thinking back to a very specific consultation in the Midwest I did, where literally there was a massive warehouse full of very, very dangerous machinery, and it was wide open. I mean, anyone on the street could just walk in this place. There was zero security. And it's sadly just not common sense. But if you're gonna do work in the defense industry, you're gonna have to accept security by law. That's it. It's that simple. Um, so I think that's one area that I think is very difficult, is if you've got leadership who doesn't want to buy into this, then that leadership should honestly just get out of the defense world. It really is that simple. And so, we say that a lot here. It's not for everybody, but if you don't believe in security, if you don't understand the value of securing your infrastructure, then the reality is that that might be a viable alternative, is just get out. But meanwhile, so that's one thing, right? Major cultural, major mind shift change. It is a definite challenge. Second one is implementation. So some of these are easy to implement. A lot of them are very complex to implement. It really depends. There are solutions out there like Elastic where you have to configure everything. Very complex. And it's expensive, and you have to configure every alert. And if you don't know what to be monitoring for, then it becomes exponentially difficult because you don't know what to monitor for. You just have no clue, right? So how do we know what we need to be doing? And that's difficult in itself, to say the least. And then there's the price point. This stuff costs money. It's an unusual item because it doesn't really have any ROI on the surface. The ROI sort of has to come from what I'll call a derivative, right? So we have to go and take the idea of being a more secure, safer business to do business with, and we have to translate that over to our sales teams who are going to sell our products and services at a slightly higher price to make that budget acceptable, right? It's a cost of doing business, and it's particularly a cost of doing business in the defense industry. You're going to have to pay for it. So there's a cultural shift, there's a payment shift, and then then there's difficulty of setup is probably one of the higher difficulty levels in the IT world. And I'll throw one more on just for a little icing on the cake. I personally think that the final piece is this. If you got like a one or two person IT department and you're staring in the face of a need for SIEM, one thing that you're going to have to consider is who's going to actually monitor this. Usually nobody thinks about that. They just go, oh, this is like antivirus. I install it, set it, and forget it. Doesn't work. It's not a set and forget solution. Every single alert that comes in must be monitored. It has to be looked at. And if you're not looking at it, it's a huge problem because when you're not looking at these things, I got to tell you, alerts will slip through that are really important. And it's the old what is it? The wolf watching the hen's nest? I don't know.
Yeah,
There's an
you
analogy.
don't want to let the fox in the hen house.
That's it. That's it.
I think that's what you're thinking of.
Yeah. So, again, you got to consider who's going to, okay, cool. I'll tell you, outsourced SOC or outsourced security operations center is a very, very popular option. It's interesting when we look across our client base, we have a tremendous number of clients who are very comfortable maintaining and managing the IT in their environments. And when they learn about SIEM and they learn about controls like this, they say, look, I know where my level of expertise is, and they're like tier two help desk kind of guys or like, server engineers, whatever, but they get real scared of the cybersecurity stuff. Frankly, just being really honest, they want someone else's throat to choke if they get hacked and attacked, right? We're like job security to them because if something really, really goes wrong, they just point the finger at on call. Fortunately, we're extraordinarily good at what we do, and we've never let an attack through, on any client in the defense industry that's got NIST SP 800-171 fully implemented. So we're really proud of that track record. But there's a lot of IT guys out there who really don't want anything to do with the cybersecurity element, right? It's a big black box. They don't know what's in it. It's very difficult. And I'll tell you, it's a place we're really expert at. We are monitoring and managing thousands of endpoints and servers. We have a very robust infrastructure that's taken years and years to build. And you know what? We also work with and team with the best of the best, from Sophos to Microsoft, and many others that I won't mention. But there's a lot of technology in our stack that allows us to effectively pull off and perform this control 3.3.3 review and update logged events. It's a major task. It can't be understated how big of a task it is because if someone's ever not watching the logs, that's when all the alarm bells will start ringing. There are a significant number of difficulties to deal with in this control. And I think that it is a major shift for a lot of companies, but it's also a shift that we can help you make, even if it's just us helping you for the first few years, and then you eventually sort of get it, and we can do some training with you as a client, and really let you take that back over if you like. But definitely some challenges to implementing this one, and it's a big shift in maturity.
Absolutely. So, you know what comes next, Mike. We like to finish these podcasts with a silly question, and this one is so stupid. So feel free to work your magic and try to make this one relevant. You know, we we're talking about logged events, and when I think about logs, I think about lumberjacks. Could a lumberjack help with these particular kind of logs?
It's a great question.
No, no, it's not. But go ahead.
When you learn about public speaking, you get trained to tell everybody that their question is great. I don't know, man. It's funny because in my mind, I just keep imagining those lumberjack Olympics that used to be on TV. I actually, we went to Alaska on a family cruise and we actually saw a lumberjack show and it was quite entertaining. The kids loved it.
They,
Um,
they need to put those back on TV.
I'm with you, man. I think that was good TV. Lumberjacks, man. I don't know. They go into the woods, they chop stuff down. The only The thing I can even try to draw, a link to is if you're looking at a lumberjack and what they do, they come in, they chop down they chop down trees and they take the trees and they, make those trees into a usable product like paper. I think that a seam solution is very much sort of like that. I don't know. I'm going to reach on this one. But what a seam solution really does is it takes all of the log files coming out of these devices, computers, servers, firewalls, etc., and it's going to take a lot of that forest or that noise, and it's going to chop it down and make an end product that's usable, which is an alert for the IT team to know what's going on. And by the way, some of these SIEM systems are integrated with SOCs that can actually take action on those alerts. Some of them will have an automatic end user isolation component to it so that they can actually isolate the computer if it's got a really severe problem past a certain threshold. Again, it's acting in that sense of making something usable out of a whole lot of noise that comes out of logs on a computer. But somewhere in that noise, is really, really useful information, just like, turning a log into paper or wood or couch, and getting rid of the rest of the bark and the leaves and things like that. So I think in that regard, all I can tell you is, both lumberjacks and seam solutions make things that are ordinary into very useful stuff.
I don't know how you did it, but you did it. I feel like my job here on this podcast is to trip Mike up, and because he's a little inside baseball here for our listeners and our viewers. When we first started doing this, Mike told me, he said, "Don't send me the questions ahead of time, so that I can think about it on the fly." And so I kind of took that as a challenge, not with the main three questions, but with the silly question. I said, I'm going to trip him up. I'm going to find ways to make him pause and not know what to do. And for a second, I thought this one did it. And he still managed to make it relevant. That's just how good he is.
It's a good question. It's a good question.
No, it's not. Stop lying to the people. And that wraps up another great episode of Mission Compliance. We hope our discussion today has provided you with valuable insights and practical strategies and inspiration to navigate the ever-evolving world of defense. We'd like to thank Mike for joining us on this great topic of reviewing logged events and somehow managing to give us relevant information out of a question about lumberjacks. Thanks, Mike.
Hey, always a pleasure, Roman.
But the conversation doesn't end here. We encourage you to continue exploring these topics and connect with us on our social media channels. Share your thoughts, ask questions, and engage with fellow listeners using the hashtag Mission Compliance Podcast. If you haven't already, what should they do, Mike?
Well, they should definitely like this episode just because of that answer I just gave. And they should tell their friends, they should like, and most importantly, they should definitely subscribe because you know what? We're bringing you the heat every day out here. Every week we've got new amazing content, particularly if you're listening to us here on YouTube. We really work hard to make sure that you've got some awesome stuff to work with, and that we're just ultimately making that journey to compliance so much easier. So definitely make sure to subscribe and tell your friends.
You should do all the things that Mike just said, because if you subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast platforms, you'll be alerted when new episodes like this one are released. We truly appreciate it if you could take a minute to rate and review the show. Your feedback helps us to continue to bring you thought-provoking episodes and high-quality content. Join us next time as we delve further into the dynamic world of defense, security, and industry innovation. Until then, take care, stay informed, and make compliance your mission. See you next time.
Thanks, everybody.